All right. Welcome, everyone, and happy Earth Day. My name is Randy Wadera, and I have the honor of speaking to you from Santa Cruz, California. It's the ancestral lands of the Ohlone Awaswas tribe. I'm also honored to be a part of the California State Parks Foundation as the Director of Philanthropy. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and helping us celebrate this 51st anniversary of Earth Day. It's also the 51st anniversary of the California State Parks Foundation. Our state parks exemplify all the gifts that nature gives us. And by being good stewards, we ensure the future generations will receive those gifts as well. And today you're going to meet and hear from some incredible stewards, some real park champions. But before I introduce those wonderful people, I want everyone to give yourself a shout out in the chat. Ashley will be also setting a link of the native lands. So if you want to research what native tribal lands that you're from, you can do that as well. We'd like to also hear where you're from and any parks that you might enjoy. Throughout today's presentation, you can ask questions in the chat, and our behind the scenes team of Ashley and Samantha are going to answer those afterwards. Also, everyone will be muted during the presentation because we have limited time and we want to give a chance for our panelists to be able to speak to the issues at hand. We won't be taking live questions during the presentation. More than ever, our planet needs champions. They are the front lines of our efforts to confront climate change. And this is what at the California Foundation, we are laser focused on helping build climate resilient parks. We are working from the redwoods of Del Norte County to the estuaries and beaches of Borderfield State Park in San Diego to help parks prepare for wildfires and sea level rise. By activating Californians and partners with projects and programs and parks to galvanizing our voices in Sacramento, we believe that together we can work to build these parks and make them climate resilient. And now I want to introduce our panelists today. We have Cara Stafford, who is the California State Parks environmental scientist. Hi, Cara. Give us a wave. Say hello.
Hi, Randy. Hi, everybody.
We have Tanisha Gupta, who is a California State Parks Foundation Youth Corps leader. Tanisha, give us a shout out.
Hi, everybody.
And we have Scott Ammons, who's the REI Experience Manager working with us. Scott, give us a hello.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
All right. Well, we're going to go right into having our panelists each present a little bit on the work that they're doing and from their perspective, how we're building climate resilient parks. We're going to start off with Cara, who will give a brief background on her work and explain the issues that climate change and how state parks are facing them and what she's doing. So Cara, we're going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Randy. And thanks, everybody, for joining the conversation today. I'm really excited to be here. I work as an environmental scientist in the San Diego Coast District, which is on Kumeyaay ancestral land and San Luis Rey ancestral land. And I work on habitat protection and restoration to maintain the fantastic biodiversity in state parks. We have a wide variety of habitats, as you know, if you've been out in the parks, from tide pools and salt marshes, forest and chaparral. And so I love working at state parks. It's been my passion for a long time, and Park Champions has been a huge part of that. I love having volunteers out in the park to help do the important work, and also just to, network and have fun. So I'll explain a little bit about the issues that climate change is causing in state parks and just the general situation now. So climate change is already happening, we know that, and we're seeing effects across the state. Climate impacts in California include reduced snowpack, increased flooding, increased length and severity of drought, more extreme heat days, sea level rise, of course, on our coasts, increasing number and intensity of wildfire, and loss of biological diversity. Some examples of how climate change is impacting state parks directly. There's an example from the Tijuana estuary here in Southern California. We're seeing warm water species that were once considered rare here much more often. In fact, we're seeing them consistently in some of our long-term estuary monitoring efforts. We've seen that the yearly average water temperature at the Tijuana estuary has been 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above the 20-year average. So we're seeing a lot of species that normally live to the south of us come north due to these marine heat waves. Of course, communities and state parks have been impacted by wildfires. We've also seen extreme drought and bark beetle infestations kill millions of trees, including here in San Diego. We have the rarest pine tree in North America, the Torrey pine, which has been also impacted by drought and bark beetles. And then another example, I am biased to the coast, of course, but along the ocean where we have roads and parking lots and restrooms at our state beaches that are being damaged by sea level rise and increased wave run up during winter storms and king tides. So this is forcing us to think about more sustainable solutions for maintaining safe access for everybody to the beach. But zooming out a little bit, California is a global leader in addressing climate change and building climate resilience through policies, programs, and partnerships that also increase equity, improve public health, and create economic opportunity. And in fact, we were the first state in the nation to commit to a 30 by 30 goal, which is really exciting. That's a pledge to conserve 30% of the state's land and waters by 2030 to confront the threats of climate change and biodiversity loss. So state parks plays a critical role in the state's response to climate change because we manage more land than any other state agency. Much of it was selected for protection based on its biodiversity values. So it's really important land. It also contains a wealth of cultural resources that we are going to protect in perpetuity. State Parks manages about 1/3 of the state's coastline as well, which is of course under threat from rising sea level rises and warming ocean temperatures. So just to wrap up, since 2013, we've participated in sustainable building through LEED certifications and transitioned part of our state parks fleet to electric vehicles, and we're working towards carbon-free transportation. We've also started to build environmental resilience in state parks through partnerships, through funding for wildfire resilience and climate science. We're working on sea level rise adaptation strategies, which sounds wonky, but basically on the coast, we have to prepare for these extreme storm events and sea level rise to make sure that our infrastructure stays put and we can still support all the great recreational opportunities that park visitors want on the beach. And of course, we're working on wildfire and forest resilience as well in Northern California, doing prescribed burns and forest restoration. So, I guess the takeaway briefly is that limiting global warming requires limiting our total cumulative CO2, but there's still time to avoid some of the worst outcomes, and what we do in the next decade is critical. So again, I'm really excited about the conversation here, and pass it off to Randy.
Thank you, Cara. That was great to get that broad view, and thanks to many of the folks who are on the webinar today. The foundation was able to raise significant money for grants to help with wildfire recovery. We're working on partnering on some projects with sea level rise. It's really, as we say, the state parks are really on the front line right now. And the work that you're doing, Cara, is so significant and important. We really appreciate you making the time to be here. Also important are our volunteers and the people who make things happen in the parks, partnering with folks like Cara on the ground And now it's my pleasure to introduce Tanisha Gupta, who will talk a little bit about herself and why she feels volunteers are important and how they make a difference in building climate resilient parks. Tanisha, we're looking forward to hearing from you. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanisha Gupta, and I'm a freshman in high school. I'm also a member of the volunteer core lead team at Half Moon Bay State Beach and CSPF's very own youth coalition. So ever since I was a young kid, my family has gone on road trips every chance that we get. During family road trips, we journey to discover the natural and cultural wonders of California. Seeing the historical buildings at Angel Island State Park, I appreciate and understand the rich history of this country. Standing on top of the lookout at Mount Diablo State Park, I've grown to admire the natural beauty preserved by our state parks. And learning about the plight of defenseless snowy plovers in Half Moon Bay has helped me recognize the need to continue preserving the environment. The knowledge and experience I have gained will stay with me forever and cannot be learned just by reading a book. Given these experiences, I would like to protect parks for the future generations, just as those who came before me did for me. A very important part of this is making sure that our parks are climate resilient. Climate change, as Cara mentioned, can exacerbate current natural disasters. This is what happened last year, exacerbating some of the most destructive wildfires. Volunteers are extremely important to making state parks and the environment more resistant to climate change. At Half Moon Bay State Beach, we have two incredible and amazing park staff, Ethan and Joanne, who manage habit restoration from Devil's Slide down to Ani Nuevo. All of the amazing things we've been able to accomplish with help from Ethan and Joanne has been due to volunteer work. Every summer, work crews from CSPF go out and weed areas of Half Moon Bay Beach and remove invasive plants. We then plant native plants from our volunteer-run nursery during the winter months. Through COVID-19, Half Moon Bay has had a group of super volunteers that come to the park every Thursday morning and work on restoration projects. The results are visible as more and more native flora and fauna return to and take back their park. But returning natives aren't the only plus of habitat restoration. At parks directly affected by wildfires, less invasive plants mean smaller, more manageable fires. According to the California Invasive Plant Council, approximately 3% of the plant species in California growing in the wild are considered invasive, but they inhabit a much, much greater domain. Invasive plants dry up and serve as perfect fuel for the ruthless fires, according to the LA Times. However, as with any long-term issue and struggle, there is still work to be done in all state parks, not just Half Moon Bay, and I believe volunteers are the key to that. Volunteers currently can and do continue to make our state parks more resilient to climate change. State park staff are doing their best to identify problems and figure out which strategies we should employ in order to make our parks resilient. As volunteers, we should take the challenge in stride and strive to make a big difference for our parks. This can be done by attending as many workdays as possible. Another way is by encouraging other people to volunteer. This will get more volunteers into parks and allow parks to complete larger scale projects. Volunteers can try to organize corporate related events or efforts with local community groups. Volunteers can advocate for parks with local Congress members, and this can be done through Park Advocacy Day, which is just around the corner. Finally, contributing to climate resilience doesn't always have to take place in parks. Picking up trash in your local community or buying an electric car or otherwise contributing to your local community's climate resilience is no small feat, and I encourage everyone to do so. For youth looking to participate in increasing the climate resilience of their local parks, I have 3 words for you: volunteer, educate, and advocate. Volunteering is fairly simple. Contribute to resilience through hands-on work through either a CSPF event or one local by your local community. Educate. As youth, use whatever platforms you have available to educate others about the importance of state parks and climate resilience. These platforms could include social media such as TikTok or Instagram, or through school clubs and newspapers. Getting the message out there and educating youth about these problems are some of the most important parts of getting more people to help climate resilient parks and surrounding communities. Finally, advocate. This step means doing whatever you can to advocate for the continued existence of and the future of your state parks. This advocacy can be done through structured events such as Park Advocacy Day or social media posts regarding these issues. In short, use the tools you know how to use best in order to advocate for something you care about. As youth, We are the future of parks, and we need to do our best to protect them.
I just want to take a moment, Tanisha, just to have us all take in just the power of your words. And I know from my perspective and those of us at the foundation, we couldn't accomplish nearly the scope and the scale of what we do if it wasn't for volunteers and folks like you. We're truly inspired by you. And I think Scott would agree with me to have people like Cara and Tanisha on the front line working to help solve these problems and inspiring us is truly, it's truly a gift. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll have a chance to ask you some more questions and hear from both of you more. But I want to introduce and have introduced our third panelist is Scott Ammons from REI. Scott is going to talk a little bit about our partnership. And again, similar to our volunteers and our state park partners, the foundation wouldn't have the ability to make the kind of impact it can if not for our incredible partners. And this year, REI has stepped up in incredible ways of helping us get the word out, helping us recruit thousands of volunteers to activate this year. So Scott, take it away and tell us a bit about your work with REI.
Thanks, Randy. And yes, I'm very proud to share the panel with Cara and Tanisha. Tanisha, wow, you're a very inspiring young person. As the father of a 13-year-old, I would be very happy if he could do anything similar to what you're doing. So way to go. Yeah, so my name is Scott Ammons, and I'm the REI Experience Manager for Southern California. I'll explain what that job is in a second, but I am coming to you today from the ancestral lands of the Tongva and the Gabrielino tribes. I live in the San Pedro area of Los Angeles. And so my job here at REI is an interesting one because it combines, one, I help do our corporate philanthropy, so giving out money to nonprofits that do work on climate resilience and on supporting the places that we all love to recreate and play, from local parks to state parks to national parks and everything in between. We also do a lot of work to build community, and building that community is one of the great ways that we have of taking action on things that we care about, whether that's helping getting legislation passed locally, at the state level, at the federal level, and activating those people to go out and do good things. So we provide a platform for them to get out there, and for all of our partners, all the people that we support, things like California State Parks Foundation, and locally in Los Angeles, things like the Friends of the LA River and the Surfrider Foundation, and Friends of the Angeles National Forest, the National Forest Foundation. So by having these partnerships with all of these great, amazing NGOs that support the places that we love and help support equity in those places, we can support them through grants, but we can also provide them a platform for letting people know about all the great opportunities they have to get involved. For example, one of the things that we're doing with the California State Parks Foundation right now is we have a partnership about Earth Day Climate Action Month. So we are trying to get the word out to everybody in California that April is Climate Action Month, and for Earth Day, they can register to get a free kit to go out and do your own DIY service project. So you can sign up, register online, then come into an REI store as long as kits are available, and be able to get things like gloves, trash bags, a few thank you gifts like stickers, and go out and do your own stewardship project. And that can be anywhere you want to do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a state park. So like I know for me and for a lot of people, the most important outdoor place for them is the one that's closest to them. So where I walk my dog every day, where I go for runs, where we as a family go out and have picnics, and then with the state parks as well. Another one of the things I wanted to talk about today is REI just launched a new thing called the REI Cooperative Action Network. And what that is basically REI since 1938, when it was founded, has always had community and stewardship and taking care of the places we love at the foundation of what the co-op is. So we've been doing this work for over 80 years. But this network is a new way for us to create positive impact on the issues that are core to the REI community. And those issues right now are climate change and racial equity. So we've always been founded on the principle that we want to bring people together to do greater good. That's why REI was created as a co-op. And a lot of people don't really know what it means that we're a co-op. But as a co-op, we are actually managed for the benefit of our community. We give over 70% of our profits back to the community every year. And a lot of that comes from things like philanthropy, where we're giving grants back out to community groups that are doing great work. And it also, part of that is the dividend that you get and profit sharing with employees. But we wanted to find a way to activate all of those members that we have. Like right now, we have 20 million members across the country. And if we can help those 20 million people that are knowledgeable about what REI is and are getting some of our messages, if we can get them to take action on things, whether that's joining in this California State Parks Earth Month, or advocating for legislation. Right now, we're advocating for some legislation at the federal level. One of the ones that we're asking people to email Congress about is the Replant Act. And that's a bipartisan solution that supports planting 1.2 billion trees over the next decade and helps US forests capture 75 million metric tons of carbon. So it'll also, help erase all of the carbon that's put into the US through driving things like cars and burning gasoline. But it can also help create thousands of forestry jobs. So through this Climate Action Network, it is one of the ways that REI is trying to have a positive impact on the world and take action on climate change. Another thing that we have been working on for some time, but we announced this last fall, that REI was going to reduce its carbon footprint by 55% by 2030. So that goes right along with what we heard today from the president, that we're going to try and reduce our national carbon footprint by 52% by 2030. So we like to think that, along with a lot of other people, we're helping lead the way. But REI has been to do that for years by transferring some of our stores, the ones that we own, to have solar panels and use solar energy. Also reducing packaging. And a big part of that savings is coming from working not just with what REI does as a corporation, but through the entire supply chain. So that's an important thing to note, is trying to go all the way down to where things are created and made and shipped, and working on how you can reduce the carbon that's emitted through that entire process. Another interesting thing that we're doing right now is we're trying to encourage people to not necessarily buy new gear, to buy used gear. So REI has been known for years for having things like used gear sales, where you can take either lightly used or just returned items and use them again. Now we also have a new way for you to actually return your unused items or items that are no longer valuable to you back to REI so that they can be resold, so that we are taking part in that circular economy. But basically, buying a used piece of gear has half the carbon footprint of buying new. Imagine what we could do if every member just swapped out pieces of gear. We all have things like jackets and packs that are sitting in our closet somewhere and maybe haven't been loved or seen or used in years. It would be wonderful if we can find a way to take that stuff and let it have a new life. I know right now, the other part of my job is actually run REI's guide service for Southern California. So we take people out on experiences all over, paddling, hiking, climbing, mountain biking. And we use gear to do that. But at the end of its life, 1 to 2 years later, we take and then resell all that stuff back to people through things like our used gear sale. So that's another way to really take this stuff and give it another life and do our part to limit our carbon output. So thanks. I'll leave it right there and hand it back to you, Randy.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm proud to say that I've been an REI member since 1985 when I graduated from UC San Diego, and I bought my first backpack to do some backpacking. And I still have that backpack, and my kids have used it to do backpacking. And so just really appreciate hearing REI and all that you're doing. The Action Network that you've put together, I've really taken a look at, and I just think it's fabulous. I really appreciate the values that REI bring to this. And for everybody on the webinar today, I think what we have here is a representation of corporation, individual, and a state agency, and it's really takes all of us to sort of attack a situation, a challenge like climate change. And that's why I think that this panel is so valuable to hear from, and to hear about how all of our work is intersecting to attack this challenge. I want to get a little bit deeper into this because all of you said some pretty profound things, but let's try to stitch this together a little bit more, because climate change is a challenge, and we need to get a vision of how we put all these pieces together. And Cara, I want to start with a question for you, and because climate change can be such an existential threat, right? It can feel so overwhelming. But maybe you can, in the context of a state park, what does it mean to have a climate resilient state park? What does that look like to you? And help us get a picture for that in our minds, if you would.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And it's, it looks a little different in state parks than it might be for an individual or a corporation. But the way that I look at it is that climate resilience means using the best available science to better prepare for and respond to the changes that our warming climate is creating. And climate resilient parks use nature-based solutions. So for state parks, this might mean making our infrastructure more resilient to storms and sea level rise using more nature-based solutions. It might mean incorporating climate change modeling into some of our restoration work. It might mean partnering with CAL FIRE, tribes, and the Forest Service to do bigger prescribed burning across our forested landscapes. And it definitely includes reducing the carbon footprint of park operations in general. One thing to remember is that California is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots. And so, climate resilience is something we need to do to maintain the healthy ecosystems so that they can withstand these climate changes.
I love the concept of nature solutions or natural solutions because nature is systems, right? It's systematic, it's not static. And so I think about projects like Living Shorelines that I know that State Parks is doing, where we know that sea level rise is happening. So using it rather than a static solution is using one that's dynamic, like natural systems. So really, I've learned a lot about that in recent years, and I think State Parks is a real leader in those types of natural solutions. Things like prescribed burns for wildfires, again, is returning back that sort of native managed lands to help suppress the wildfires. So State Parks, I really feel, is a leader. We learn a lot from you. Speaking of learning a lot, who we're learning a lot from, Tanisha, you had mentioned advocacy, and your voice is so clear and so resolute. It's really compelling to listen to you talk about sort of advocacy, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you feel advocacy can help us in terms of building climate resilience and fighting climate change.
Yeah. So I think advocacy is super important. One, because advocacy means that, well, at least for me, it means getting the word out there to people who can make a difference. As a teenager, a lot of times my voice isn't all that important, especially to adults. But as I've been getting more involved, sort of in the community that state parks provide, my voice is meaning a lot more. And I know that there are lots of people out there on social media or just in general who are able to get significant change just by using their voice. And so that's why I think, like, as a youth and as a core leader, it's really important to have that advocacy. And then the second thing is advocacy is not just getting the word out there to people who can do something about it. It's getting the word out there to other people who can help you do something about it. For example, through social media or through just talking to your friends at school, at least if it's, or coworkers, right? That can sort of just get the word out there and help other people understand why it's so important to protect our state parks and our national parks. And state parks and national parks have given me so much throughout my entire life that I feel like this is one way that I can give back.
I think a lot about the generation that you represent, and that I feel that climate change may be one of the biggest challenges that I feel you and your peers face. And the idea of advocacy is for us so significant because we know that without sort of systemic change, we really aren't, all of our individual efforts are gonna be hard to kind of climb this hill. And so your voice, lend it, and the voice of your peers in terms of really addressing issues like climate change systemically through advocacy, I think is so critical. So thank you for being that champion. And also, Scott, the question for you is similar to that, and you touched a little bit on it, and speaking, from where you're sitting, is like, how can corporations like REI help us sort of climb this mountain in terms of building climate resilient parks and addressing climate change? We've heard about your advocacy efforts. Give us some more examples of how we can really connect to what REI is doing.
Yeah, I think part of our role is one, to clearly state what REI's position is, and take a stand and have an opinion, and then do things that follow up and live up to those words and those commitments. And I've been really proud of REI the last few years of how much we've done more to say out loud what we care about and what we think others should care about too. So that's one of the first things that I think corporations can do, is one, just live up to the values that they have and let the people know what those values are. And then I think the other great thing that we've been able to do is just amplify the messages of all of the great people that we work with and have relationships with, whether that's NGO partners like the State Parks Foundation or the National Forest Foundation or the National Parks Foundation, but take that work that they're doing and then amplify that through all of the touch points we have with people, whether that's through our blog, through our website, through online shopping, through shopping in the store, whether they're coming out on a trip with us to learn how to kayak, or we're going mountain biking at Malibu Creek State Park. We take every one of those touch points and try and educate them about things that we know that they probably would care about if they knew about them. So whether that's advocating for legislation or taking part in a stewardship project, or supporting one of these groups that we know they would care about and share values with. Another thing we can do is be a convener of people and groups. Like a good example I had from a few years ago is following the Thomas Fire in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. We saw a lot of our groups that we had, had grants and relationships with. They were all trying to respond to that fire and recovery, but they weren't aligning their efforts. So we just asked all of the people that we had relationships with, would it be helpful if we brought all of you together in one place and tried to work on this as a unified group of people instead of 10 separate groups all working with this. And they all said yes, and it was great. That was just one of the things of like, okay, let's get everyone together. We'll find a place. We'll provide a platform and we'll create a conversation. And through working together, we were able to do a lot more to raise money and support the recovery of that area from that fire damage. Another thing that I think we're doing is we can help bring together other corporations and help them follow along. For years, there's been a national organization called the Outdoor Industry Association, which REI helped found. And that brings all of the national companies together to align on issues and advocate for things and giving them a voice. And now we're doing the same thing in the state of California. REI is one of the founding members of this thing called the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership, which is a trade group for the outdoor industry in the state of California. And we help them come together and advocate for things that we care about in Sacramento at the state level. So working both state and national level and convening people and just helping amplify voices, I think is something that REI and other corporations can do.
Thank you, Scott. Just doing a time check, but I do want to hear just a final word from each of our panelists. You're speaking to a couple hundred people today. You have a chance to connect and help connect all of us to the work that you're doing. So if you had a couple final words on, from your point of view, from Cara in the state parks, from Tanisha as a youth advocate and volunteer, and Scott as a community builder amongst REI, a couple parting words for our panelists to send them off as we all go out and try to enjoy the gifts that nature give us, and also to keep in mind how we can continue to be good stewards and be park champions ourselves. Cara?
Well, there's a lot out there. I mean, I think number one, get out in the parks, get out in nature, bring the people from your community that maybe don't get out into the parks as much, bring them along with you, because like Scott and Tanisha brought up, you can only advocate for things that you know about and you care about. And, I would say on a broader level, look at being a more conscious consumer and maybe ultimately less of a consumer. I really like what Scott was saying about REI, encouraging circular economy. And, the reason why I would say to avoid, fast fashion, single-use plastics, take out containers and bags and stuff, is that, all of that stuff ends up in the ocean and on our state beaches and the state parks. And our lifestyle really does impact the earth. There is one earth. And so, I love the advocacy. I like, some personal responsibility and also just thinking about collective action. It really does start with our local communities and, continuing to advocate for, put your word out to companies that you really like and say like, hey, we think you should change your practices. We care about sustainability, and, keep coming to parks and also participating park champions and just in general, like being a voice for what matters. And I just want to thank everybody for all their ideas. I'm really excited hearing from Tanisha and Scott, and yeah, that's it, I think.
Thank you, Cara. Tanisha, any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, in a similar vein as Cara, I'd just like to repeat the 3 words: volunteer, educate, and advocate. So volunteer, and even if you aren't able to volunteer because of time commitments, just come to parks. Parks are great. The beach is amazing. The redwoods are amazing. And all of the things that are protected are absolutely amazing and beautiful. And educate, let other people know. As Scott was mentioning, there are a lot of people who I know would care so much about state parks and the environment if they just knew that there was something going on and that there was a problem, and climate resiliency is very important. So just educate, let everybody know that this is an important problem, And finally, advocate for state parks with Congress members and people who vote on these changes, and advocate just in general to sort of gather with other people and help, create change. So yeah.
Thank you. Always a hard act to follow, but Scott, I'd love to hear some final thoughts from you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Tanisha and Cara and Randy. Yeah, I mean, climate change can be overwhelming to think about. And the thing that we try and do is just encourage people to do something, whether it's small, anything you do can make a difference. Whether that's just going out and picking up trash, doing your own stewardship project. I really encourage people to get involved, to find a local group that is doing something that you care about, whether it's supporting a park or supporting equity or supporting people in the outdoors. Doing anything, donating $5, sending an email, sending a text, all of that makes a difference. And then just small changes. REI in 2019 did this great thing called Replant Act, where it gave you 52 weeks of changes that you can make in your life that will help do something on climate change. And those things are as small as like bringing your own grocery bags. You can opt out of junk mail. So all of that mail that piles up in at your house, like you don't have to get it. Like reduce all of that paper that's coming to you. And mostly, people like to talk about recycling, but recycling is great, but reduce and reuse. Repair things that you have, buy things of quality, don't buy too much. Buy just what you need and nothing more, and try and keep it for a long time.
Thank you, Scott. Just want to end with the thought to share. Behind me is a photo of a Sequoia sempervirens and coast redwood, tallest living plant thing on the planet. And even though it's so tall, its roots are very shallow, going down 10 or 12 feet. And the way that the coast redwood survives is it reaches its roots out in every direction. And when you walk through a redwood forest, all those roots are connecting, and those redwoods talk to each other and they support each other. And that's how they're going to survive climate change. That's how they've survived for thousands and thousands of years, is because they have that ability to connect. And you're walking through a community. And as you can see, Scott, Tanisha, Cara, you're part of our community. And thank you for helping us to stand tall and to help us to address the issues that we're facing together as a planet community and in our individual communities. Thank you to everyone who showed up and spent time with us today. Of course, you could always go to the foundation if you want to find out more about the advocacy we're working on. There's a climate bond coming up that we're really fighting hard on. You can also sign up to volunteer and work side by side with Tanisha and Cara in a park that you really care about. And of course, you can help us and join as a member and keep alert to all the issues and learn more about all the things that are happening in parks every day. I want to thank also the team behind the scenes, Sydney, Ashley, and Samantha. I have a wonderful team that I work with at the foundation, and they make so much happen every day to protect and preserve our parks. And finally, again, Scott, Tanisha, Cara, it's lovely to spend a morning with you and to hear all the work that you're doing. You inspire us. We have deep caring for all that you are doing. Thank you for being champions, and thank you all on this call for being champions. Have a wonderful Earth Day. Take care. Bye-bye.